In the stillness of the morning, a young monk walked alone through the forest, seeking answers in the serenity that only silence could offer. He had heard the master's words many times, "Be like a lamp for yourself, be your refuge." However, he still did not fully understand their meaning. The monk hoped to find a revelation, a glow that would light his way. Each step resonated in his soul, as if the very ground whispered ancient secrets. The sun was just beginning to rise, painting the sky a soft orange. But beyond the beauty of the landscape, there was an inner darkness he still did not know how to dispel. In the distance, he saw a small cabin nestled among the trees. He decided to approach. The wind blew gently, carrying with it the whisper of dry leaves. As he walked toward the cabin, the young monk wondered, how could he be a lamp for himself when he still felt lost in the darkness of his mind? The master, who lived in that cabin, looked at him in silence when he arrived. He knew the monk was seeking answers, but he did not speak immediately. The answer, the master thought, would not come in words, but in experience. The young monk sat in front of him, waiting for the silence to speak. Finally, the master broke the silence with a simple question. "What do you see when you look at yourself in the water?" The young monk looked toward the small pond nearby, where the water reflected his face. "I see my face," he replied, still not understanding. The master smiled and said, "And if the water moves, what do you see then?" The monk watched as the wind stirred the water, distorting his reflection. "I see a face that changes, that fades," he replied. The master nodded. "Such is the mind. It is like the water, constantly moving. If you seek outside of yourself, you will only see distorted reflections. But if you are like the lamp, you will be the light that does not depend on the outside." The monk, still silent, began to understand the depth of the master's words. But he knew that there was still a long way to go. The afternoon began to fade, and the monk remained seated next to the master, reflecting on his words. The wind continued to move the leaves of the trees, creating a dance of shadows and light on the ground. The master, with his calm gaze, did not seem rushed. He knew that the path to understanding required time and patience. "How can I be a lamp for myself?" asked the young monk, the unease still present in his voice. The master smiled again, but this time he stood up without saying a word and began to walk toward the garden, where a small lotus flower grew. The monk followed him in silence, observing each step of the master with attention. "Do you see this flower?" asked the master as he crouched before the delicate lotus flower, whose beauty seemed suspended in the very air. "Yes," replied the young monk. "This flower grows in the deepest mud, where darkness and filth seem to prevail, but its essence does not depend on the darkness around it. It blooms by itself, guided by an inner light that does not depend on the sun or anything outside of it," the master explained. The young monk looked at the flower more attentively. The image of the flower growing in the mud, not succumbing to the darkness around it, began to sink deeply into his heart. "Just like the lotus flower, you also have an inner light," continued the master. "But to see it, you must stop seeking outside. The refuge you seek is not in others or in circumstances. It is within you, waiting to be discovered." The young monk remained thoughtful. He felt a strange calm inside, but also a sense of uncertainty. How could he connect with that inner light? How could he be the lamp for himself when he still felt the shadow of his doubt surrounding his being? The master, as if he had read his thoughts, said softly, "The light is not afraid of the darkness. On the contrary, darkness only exists because there is something that illuminates it. When you find your own light, you will see that the darkness you fear is nothing but an illusion." With those words, the young monk closed his eyes for a moment. The wind brushed his face, and a whisper seemed to arise from within him. Something was awakening inside him, something he could not explain, but that he felt with certainty. Con esas palabras, el joven mange cero los ojos por un momento. El viento acariciaba su rostro, y en susurro parecía surgir de su interior. Algo despertaba dentro de él, algo que no podía explicar, pero que sentía con certeza. The night slowly fell, and the sky filled with stars. The monk and the master sat in silence beneath the vast expanse of the heavens. The moonlight gently illuminated the landscape, and for the first time in a long time, the young monk felt at peace. Yet something still troubled him. Although he had understood the master's words, he felt that something was still missing. His mind continued to seek answers, though now with a deeper stillness. "Master," the monk finally said, "I feel there is something more I must understand. The lotus flower blooms in the mud, but I am still afraid to dive into my own mud. How can I find the light amidst the darkness of my mind?" The master looked up at the stars, his eyes reflecting an infinite calm. "The mind is like the night sky," he began to say. "When you look at the sky, it may seem dark and empty, but if you look closer, you will see that it is filled with stars, each one shining with its own light. Darkness is not the absence of light, but a space where light can be seen clearly." The young monk, watching the stars attentively, understood what the master meant. "So my mind is not empty? The darkness I feel is not an emptiness?" "No," the master replied. "The darkness you feel is not an emptiness, but a space full of potential. The mind may seem chaotic and turbulent, but within that turbulence, there is a deep calm, an inner light waiting to be seen. The key is not to fear that darkness, but to learn to look within it with acceptance, without judgment." The monk closed his eyes and let those words settle in his heart. Something inside him opened, as if he were beginning to understand that there was nothing to fear within him. Peace was not something to seek outside of him. It was already within, waiting to be recognized. "Then, how can I see that light?" asked the monk. "The first step," said the master, "is to accept that the light is already in you. You do not need to search for it anywhere outside of yourself. The light you seek is not something you must earn, but something you must recognize. When you become your own refuge, when you are like a lamp for yourself, that light becomes visible." The young monk remained silent, contemplating the profound truth in the master's words. As he looked at the starry sky, he felt something within him beginning to shine, a soft and constant light that did not depend on anything external but on his own consciousness. Dawn arrived, and the monk woke up before the sun. He decided to go for a walk in the forest, wanting to experience for himself what the master had taught him. The fresh morning air filled him with clarity, and as he walked, he realized that nature itself was full of lessons about inner light. The sound of the birds at dawn, the murmur of the nearby stream, the softness of the leaves beneath his feet, all seemed to be in harmony with something greater than himself, something he could not describe with words, but that he felt deeply within his being. As he walked among the trees, the idea of being a lamp for oneself began to take root in his heart. When he reached a clearing, he sat on the ground and closed his eyes. He inhaled deeply, feeling the fresh air fill his lungs. He remembered the master's words, "Light does not depend on the outside." At that moment, something inside him relaxed. The tension he had felt earlier, the constant search outside of himself, began to fade away. It was not necessary to search for peace. It was not necessary to search for clarity. They were already within him, like the light in the lamp, waiting to be seen. He only needed to stop and observe. With his eyes closed, he focused on his breath. He inhaled and exhaled, feeling how each breath took him deeper into the center of his being. The mind tried, as always, to escape into scattered thoughts, but the monk did not fight against them. Instead, he observed them like the waves of the sea, knowing that the waves always come and go. There was no need to hold on to them. In that space of acceptance, he began to feel a soft light, like a warm breeze enveloping his heart. It was not an external light, nor something he could touch, but it was there, like an unshakable presence. It was not the light that illuminated the world, but an inner light that illuminated his own soul. He remembered the lotus flower, the image the master had shared with him. In his mind, he saw how the flower bloomed in the mud, effortlessly, without fear. In that moment, he understood that he too could bloom, even in the midst of the darkness of his thoughts and emotions. The light he sought was not something he had to find in the future, nor something that depended on circumstances. It was already within him. It was already part of his being. He only needed to be present and recognize it. Upon returning to the cabin, the monk felt different. There was something new in his being, a stillness he had never experienced before. The sun was already beginning to rise on the horizon, bathing everything in a golden light. The master observed him from his place, without needing to ask. He knew that the young monk had had a profound experience, something that could no longer be undone. "Master," began the young monk, his voice filled with a new serenity. "I have been searching for the light in many places, but now I understand that I could only find it within myself." The master nodded slowly. "That's right. The lamp you seek does not need to be lit by external forces. The light you have is already within you. All you need to do is remember that it is there. Do not seek outside what already resides in the heart." The young monk felt a deep gratitude, as if, by speaking those words, his entire being had aligned with the present moment. There was nothing missing, nothing that needed to be achieved. He was already whole. "But, Master," the monk said after a moment, "when I feel surrounded by the world and its distractions, I struggle to maintain that calm. Sometimes I feel that the darkness wraps around me again." The master smiled gently, understanding the young monk's concerns. Darkness will never completely disappear, just as shadows will never disappear as long as the sun exists. But the shadow cannot extinguish the light. What matters is that you become the lamp that can shine even in the darkness. Do not worry about what happens outside of you. Instead, become the refuge that supports you. "How can I do that?" asked the young monk, his voice now full of a new curiosity. "With every breath, with every step, with every thought, choose to be present. Choose to be the light that does not depend on what is happening around you. When you face darkness, do not fight against it. Just light your own light. It is as simple as that." The young monk nodded, feeling a wave of peace wash over his being. He realized that, although the world might be filled with uncertainty, he could always return to his inner light, his refuge. For the first time, he understood that being a lamp for oneself did not mean being perfect, nor living without challenges. It meant accepting what is, finding peace amidst the storm, and knowing that, regardless of the circumstances, he could always return to his center. The day passed, and life in the cabin remained peaceful. The young monk, now with a renewed sense of calm, devoted himself to daily tasks with a presence he had never known before. Cleaning the temple, sweeping the garden, preparing tea. He did everything with mindfulness, as if each act were an opportunity to practice the inner light that now felt so close. Sometimes the master watched him in silence, and other times he shared his thoughts. Today, while the monk was sweeping the path to the cabin, the master approached with a question. How do you feel doing these everyday tasks? The young monk looked up, surprising the master with his response. I feel that each of these tasks is a form of meditation. When I sweep the ground, when I hear the sound of the brush against the stone, everything becomes a reflection of my mind. There is no rush, no worry, only the moment. The master smiled with approval. That is being a lamp. It's not about doing something extraordinary or seeking special moments. Every moment, no matter how simple, is an opportunity to practice. The light is not in great achievements, but in the simplicity of each action done with mindfulness. The young monk looked at the master, finally understanding that being a lamp didn't mean being isolated from the world or living in perfection. It meant being present in whatever was being done, without clinging to the past or worrying about the future. Every action, every thought, every step could be an expression of inner light, if only lived with awareness. What you do in the everyday, the master continued, is the reflection of your inner light. You don't have to wait for a special moment, nor search for enlightenment. Everything is happening here and now, in every breath, in every movement. The young monk nodded, feeling deep gratitude for these words. He now understood that peace wasn't in doing something grand, but in living with attention, in being aware of each step. It didn't matter how small the task was. If done with the heart present, it became a spiritual practice. In the distance, the sound of the wind moving through the branches of the trees reminded him that life, like nature, is a constant flow. The monk no longer feared the darkness, nor the uncertainty. He knew that the light would always be there, as close as the next breath. The next day, the monk woke up with the light of the sun gently filtering through the windows of the cabin. The fresh morning air gave him a sense of renewal. He decided to go for a walk again, but this time without any goal or expectation in mind. He just wanted to be, simply to be present. As he walked among the trees, a thought began to form in his mind. The idea of being a lamp for oneself continued to accompany him, but now it felt more integrated, like something flowing through him, not as a distant goal, but as a way of being in the world. On the path, he came across an old man who seemed to be carrying a heavy load on his back. The monk approached him and, by habit, offered his help. "Can I help you carry that load?" the monk asked, noticing the difficulty of the old man. The old man looked at him with a serene smile. "How are you going to help me carry something you cannot see?" The young monk stopped, confused. "I don't understand," he said. "Each of us carries an invisible load," said the old man. "A load of thoughts, of fears, of desires. You cannot see it, but it is there. What others carry is only a part of their load, the part that can be seen. But the true load, the heaviest one, is the one that is not shown." The monk looked at him in silence, feeling the weight of those words. The invisible load. It was something that couldn't be seen with the eyes, but that every human being carried with them. And yet, the old man didn't seem worried. His gaze was serene, as if the load was part of him but didn't define him. "So, how can we let go of this load?" asked the monk, now more aware of his own inner struggle. The old man smiled faintly. "It's not about letting it go. The load is part of us, just as the shadow is part of the light. What you must learn is to live with it, not to let it drag you down, not to identify with it. Be like the lamp, be the refuge. Light does not let itself be consumed by the darkness. It illuminates the darkness. In the same way, don't let your thoughts or fears consume you. Be the refuge that sustains you." The monk nodded deeply, feeling a deeper understanding of the old man's words. The load didn't disappear, but by learning to be aware of it, it no longer had to define him. No matter how heavy the load, he could continue to be the light that illuminated his own path. After bidding farewell to the old man, The monk continued his journey, feeling a new clarity. He no longer feared the internal darkness, nor the fears that arose in his mind. He knew he could move forward, being the lamp for himself, a refuge in the midst of the shadows. The day came to an end, and the monk returned to the cabin, feeling lighter, more centered than ever. The sun began to set, painting the sky with warm shades of orange and pink. He sat in his usual spot, next to the master, and watched in silence as the world around him sank into the calm of the night. The master, with his serene gaze, looked at him for a moment and then said, "What have you learned today?" The young monk smiled, with a sense of deep peace in his heart. "I have learned that the load cannot be avoided. Each of us carries our own invisible load, but that doesn't mean we should allow it to define us. The light we seek is not outside of us. It is inside, waiting to be recognized. The darkness does not consume us if we are aware of our own light." The master nodded, satisfied. "That's right. Darkness is just a reflection of the mind, but the light that you are does not depend on it. Like a lamp that shines in the darkness, your light is constant, always present. You don't have to seek it, just recognize it." The young monk remained silent for a moment, feeling the deep truth of those words resonate within him. He no longer felt lost. He no longer felt the need to search for peace or enlightenment in the future. He knew that everything he needed was already within him, waiting to be recognized. "Master," he finally said, "how can I continue living this way, being a lamp for myself, being my own refuge?" The master looked at him with a calm smile. "Keep living with mindfulness. In every action, in every thought, in every breath, remember that you are the lamp that lights your own path. Don't look outside for what is already within. The peace you desire is not somewhere far away, nor in the future. It is in you, here and now." The monk felt more connected than ever to that inner light. He knew that no matter what came, no matter how dark the external circumstances were, he could always return to his inner refuge. He could always be the lamp that lights his own path. And with that understanding, the young monk stood up, feeling the weight of the world less dense, as if the invisible load of his mind had begun to dissolve. The silence surrounding him was no longer empty, but filled with light. In that moment, he knew that, although darkness might always be present, he was the lamp that would never stop shining.